Hello my darlings, welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, a warm welcome to you. Sabrina-Siobhan is a lifestyle channel and I create content relating to entertainment, fashion, health and fitness, weight loss, personal development and pure positivity. So if that sounds like something that you're interested in, click the subscribe button below so you don't miss out on any upcoming videos. In today's video, I'm going to be doing a recap of Love is Blind USA Season 6 Episode 1. To say I'm excited is an understatement. Honestly, I have been waiting for this to air. I'm super excited. If you haven't watched the episode yet, warning, 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 this show will contain spoilers, okay? So I'm just putting it out there. This show will contain spoilers in regards to episode 1. Without further ado, let's just get into it. This season of Love is Blind is filmed in Charlotte, North Carolina. 15 ladies, 15 men, you know the deal. Opening scene, men in their side of the house and the women in their side of the house. And Nick and Vanessa Lachey, introducing themselves to everybody. In the opening scene, the first thing that stuck out to me was Jessica. Might I say, she is absolutely stunning. She is a MILF. Okay. She was speaking about the fact that she's got a child at home and, she's here on the show and she's just a bit emotional. And Vanessa asked a really key question. Will you reveal to guys that you speak to that you've got a child in the first instance? And she said she's gonna hold back because she wants the men to get to know her for her. Okay, we're gonna stick a pin there. Let's move on. Fast forward to the first set of dates. First up in the pods, we had Trevor and Chelsea. So Trevor is 31 and is a project manager, and Chelsea is 31 and is a flight attendant and event planner. So right off the bat, in the opening scenes, Trevor was like, I'm a big guy, usually I'm judged by my appearance, I love working out, people think that I'm, just some sort of airhead or musclehead, and I really want to be known for me, for what's inside. Anyway, he gets into the pods and, introduces himself and announces that his dog's name is Chelsea. And then Chelsea said, well, my dog's name is Trevor. I actually wasn't quite sure whether she was telling the truth or not. Anyway, might be it was a bit of her humour. I don't know. Anyway, those two, for me, just hit it off straight away. They just literally had a bit of a natural connection. Trevor really came off as a really, big, friendly giant, to be honest with you. He was quite sentimental. I mean, he said one of his favourite films was The Notebook. So he was a bit of a, a soppy guy. He seems to be quite in touch with himself. Chelsea was giving off, I want to say, tomboy vibes, and she just seemed to be just really cool and down with him and, ready to just go with the flow. That is what I will say about her. And those two were just vibing, speaking really, really well. Date number 2 was Chelsea and Jimmy. So Jimmy is 28 and he works in software sales, and he's a small town boy from a small town in North Carolina. So those two, they did seem to have a bit of a general vibe. He mentioned that he hasn't really travelled much and he really, really, really wants to go travelling. And she was like, bingo, that's me. I really want to travel. I've been looking for a guy that's gonna, that can, go travelling with me and we can do this thing together. So those two seem to hit it off in that way. The fact that she was from LA, big city, and he was from small town, and she'd had that kind of external experience seemed to, he seemed to really like that. Next up, date number 3 was Jimmy and Jessica. So Jessica is 29 years old and is an executive assistant. And right off the bat, she walked into the pods, turned up the energy, and she was like, "Hi, it's your wife here." And he was like, "Whoa, okay." And she was like, "Oh, am I too forward?" I just love that about her. She's a bit of a joker, and she's got a bit of a, a goofy, playful personality. And, she said to him, "What's your kind of vibe? What do you like, to do? What's your ideal date?" And he was like, food and dinner, dinner. I'm a foodie, so dinner, drinks, and bed by 9:30. And she was like, "Yep, my kind of vibe. I'm loving it." And, those two, I feel like, just hit it off. And in fact, before the day ended, they were both like, "I feel really connected to you. I feel really good about you. I know it's quick to say, it's really fast and presumptuous, but I feel quite good about this." They both said it. And I think that they were both surprised at the fact that they felt that way. So that was really nice. Anyway, date number 4 was Jessica and Matthew. Matthew is 37 years old and he's a senior financial advisor. We're just going to take a pause here for a moment whilst we talk about the man that is Matthew. This guy is a bit of a character. So, in the scenes by himself, he said, he's had trouble dating, he's not really much of a talker, and, probably talking to the women is probably going to be one of the hardest things because he's not much of a talker. To which I thought, well, you're on the wrong show, my guy, because this is all about talking and, there isn't really much physical involvement in the first instance. But anyway, we move. So he ends up in the pod with Jessica and, he said, "Hi, I've got 15 questions, pick a number." So she was like, say for example, number 8. And he asked her the question, referring to number 8. And she answered the question and then she said, "Well, what about you?" And the man turned around and said, "I didn't realise you were going to ask me questions," and walked out the pod. The man left the pod. Red flag number 1. Anyway, moving on. Date number 5 was Sarah Ann and Matthew. Sarah Ann is 30 and she's a customer support manager. Again, the man sat there with his 15 questions and he's like, same spiel, same lines. "I've got 15 questions, pick a number." She picked a number and he asked her the question. She then proceeded to answer the question, and the question seemed to go on a bit long and a bit long and a bit long and a bit long and a bit long, and the man walked out again. He left the room. Okay. So at this point, generally, I'm thinking, is there something wrong with him? Is he on the spectrum? Could he have Asperger's, or is he autistic? In fact, I don't even want to throw labels. Could he be on the spectrum? Because I couldn't tell whether he's just being rude or whether that is just a coping mechanism for him, because this is the second time now he's walked out of the room on somebody. In the confessionals, he's speaking about love, and generally speaking to women isn't one of my strong points, and initial introductions is definitely not one of my strong points, but I really want to get better at it. By the way, when he left the room, Sarah Ann was like, "Thank fuck for that." Like, I just think she wasn't feeling him, and she could just feel how awkward, he was being. Anyway, date number 6, was between Amber and Matthew. And the scene opened up with him saying, pick a number out for, between 1 and 15. And I think she chose a number, and the question was, what are one of your short-term goals? And he was like, oh, that question's been asked already, can you pick another one? Again, blunt, direct, no filter. Say she was giving him a chance. That is what I will say, because a lot of the other ladies obviously seem to have a bit of a short patience with him, but she was giving him a chance. So she was like, ask me another question, give me something else, and he ended up asking her another question. And I think it was, what would we do if we went out on a date? And she gave her answer. I think she said, go to a festival, go on a hike, go and get some coffee. And he was like, okay. And then she asked him a question and he answered. So she was like, what do you do? And he was like, I'm in finance. And they just started talking generally. And by the end of the day, he was like, you've got really nice energy, thank you so much. And she was like, you're welcome. So that date ended, but we didn't really see much about Amber and who she was. Date number 7 was between AD and Matthew. So AD, aka Amber Desiree, is 33 and is a real estate broker. So in the opening scenes, she mentioned that previously she was a dancer on I think it was a basketball or a football team. So she's kind of used to being with ballers and, celebrity guys potentially. And she's used to being in that kind of scene, and she's used to being messed about basically. And, she's looking for the real deal. So AD basically jumped in the room and came with her question first. And she was like, why are you here? What you doing? What we doing? And he was like, well, look, I ain't doing this to become no C-list celebrity. I'm looking for real love. And she was like, same, me too. These two were talking, but she was the first person that kind of broke the ice with this man. So they're talking backwards and forwards, and the conversation seems to be flowing. It wasn't awkward, and he seemed to let his guard down. He was like, oh, I've been seeing a therapist, just because everyone else does, which I was like, what? You're not seeing a therapist because you want to, you're seeing a therapist because everybody else does. Anyway, this guy's a lot. He said that his therapist was really surprised that he was going on this show. During his therapy sessions, he answers with one word. She was really surprised at how he was going to cope, going on to the show and interacting with more than one word. And she kind of laughed at that, and I think you could see that she knew and that he was a bit of a quirky guy, but she just seemed to like it, and they were getting on really, really well. He was saying he's a small town boy, and she was like, I'm the opposite. I'm a city girl from Boston, and I'm about that life. And they just seemed to really hit it off. Date number 8 was between AD and Clay. Clay is 31 and is in sales. He's a bit of a smoothie, quite a good looking guy, and very flirty and tactile. So they get into the pod, and they're talking, and he's like, oh, AD all day every day, and making up all of these rhymes, and they're just talking, and they've got some nice banter going backwards and forwards. And he was coming off quite flirty. He's a bit of a flirty guy, a bit of a playboy, right? And I feel like Clay is the sort of guy that AD normally entertains in the outside world. So he then went on to say, I'm a bit nervous because at the end of the day, I've never done anything like this before. And I feel like if a woman can't see me, then how will I get their attention, without the physicality, And she kind of reassured him actually. And she was just like, well, we're just going to vibes, we're just going to talk, it's all about the interaction, you can do this. And she kind of gave him encouragement, and he was like, thank you so much for that. You know what? I really look forward to talking to you next time. And, and he was a bit of a cheeky chappy. And that date ended. And then that was the end of the first round of dates. So the first round of dates came to an end. Guys went back to their quarter of the house, and the ladies went back to their quarter of the house. And it was quite apparent that Matthew didn't speak to any of the guys in the house. He was completely standoffish, and he didn't speak to nobody when they were doing cheers. He stood off to the side, he didn't join in with the cheers, and he was just to himself. And the guys were like, we need to get him to talk. I don't understand this guy. Like, what is he all about? Moving on to date number 9, we had Amy and Johnny. Amy is 34 and is a PR director, and Johnny is 28 and is an account executive. So these two, actually, another couple that both just seem to be vibing with each other really nice and effortlessly. So Amy mentioned that she loved anime, and Johnny, does too, and, they love, the whole Japanese culture, and it's somewhere that they really want to go to. He seemed like he was in touch with his feminine side, I must say, because he said, he grew up with a lot of brothers and sisters. I can't remember how many of them there were, but he was just like, we all lived, very tight knit in a small house. And I'm a very family orientated person. And she then went on to divulge that she's from Puerto Rico originally, moved to the States, and was the only child for 7 years. And then her brother came along, and, her brother's her best friend. Before her brother came along, she was a bit of a loner and didn't really have nobody, and felt like a bit of a misfit. And, basically said that she's been working on herself for all of these years, and she doesn't have to have love, but it's something that she desires. And I think she was a bit emotional, I would say. She was a bit emotional. I felt like something was under the lid with her, but Johnny, listened to her really well. And these two, I think, just clicked very well. So, second dates start rolling around, and AD and Clay ended up on their second date. Both cool, fun and flirty second date, but he seems to always be referencing the physical. So he's like, I wish, I could have been cuddling up with you right now underneath this, soft blanket. And she's like, ooh. She was feeling the flirtation, but you could also tell that she had, reservations. She was kind of hesitant. I feel like she was, keeping an ear out for the flags, if that makes sense. So he was like, I love flirting. She was like, let's flirt, let's go. So those two ended up having a fun and flirty conversation. And then AD ended up on her second date with Matthew. And she walked into the room and she's like, it's me, AD. And he was like, oh, what a pleasant surprise. This guy just started warming up. And she likened him to a pistachio. She was like, he is a tough nut to crack, but once you get inside, there's something really good inside of him. And, again, both of them getting along really well. And she was like, I feel really protective over you, because obviously the other girls in the house, have obviously spoken about him and said, we don't quite get him, what's he on? And, she was just like, I feel really protective over you, and I just want to know that any other girl you're dating is, treating you right, basically. And he was like, oh, you make me nervous but comfortable at the same time. And she was just like, okay. And it was all really, I felt like, innocent and cute, but quirky, if that makes sense. Um, just the fact that she could understand him, it was really nice, to see. And him, getting to understand her, that was really nice for us to see, because he dropped his awkwardness and he was really starting to talk and everything was starting to flow. Jess and Jimmy ended up on a second date with each other, eating chicken wings, hot sauce, just having a nice time with each other. After that second date, Jess went back to the ladies' quarters and ended up having a conversation with some of the other ladies, just about how well things are going and how she's feeling him. And he started to have a bit of a cry about, girls were like, have you told him that you've got a daughter yet? And she was like, I haven't, but I've got to tell him, like, I can't, keep this from him, no longer. I've got to let him know, because I really feel like, this could be my guy. So they end up back on a third date. She rolls into the room. Hi, husband. She's really confident, really playful. And he's like, hey. And, just again, nice connection with each other. He starts opening up about his background and, his family life. Growing up, he didn't have much, or his family didn't have much, and he felt like a bit of an outsider, or felt unaccepted in comparison to, some of his peers. I think he also mentioned in that scene that he was the only person out of his family, or maybe the first person out of his family, to access higher education, so to go to uni or college, as they say in America. Family were kind of like, we don't want you to waste your money, it's going to be a waste of money. And but it worked out that it wasn't a waste of money. He's using his education and everything has worked out well for him, so his family are proud of that. So that was him opening up. She then turned around and said, well, you know what, I've got something to share with you. And he was like, uh-oh, kind of seemed a bit daunted, like, whoa, what's going on? This sounds like a secret, some kind of secret. What have you got to tell me? She was like, well, a secret implies that it's something negative, but it's not anything negative. It's just something I haven't shared with you yet. And she basically let him know that she's got a 10-year-old child, and the man looked shocked. He was shocked. He was taken back by what she said, and there were a few awkward silences. His tone changed after he heard, but she just kind of explained herself and just went on to explain, I had my daughter at 16, it was with my high school sweetheart. We broke up very early on, but we co-parent, and he's an excellent co-parent, he's an excellent dad, and we all have a great relationship where that's concerned, but this is the situation. And he listened, but he looked really, really shocked. And at the end he was like, this is not a deal breaker, but I'm just taking it in, basically. So their date ended, and then Jimmy went on his second date with Chelsea. So they're talking, and oh yeah, in fact, he said his biggest achievement to her was going to college. And then that's when he explained about the fact that he was the first out of his family to go to college. So he said it to Chelsea, not to Jess. And so he's talking about that. And then she turns around and said, well, I got married at 18. And then my man's face just dropped. He was like, what? What are you talking about? Like, it just kind of came out of nowhere, to be honest with you. And he was like, what are you talking about? And he was just like, change the subject. And he just changed the subject. And she naturally felt dismissed by the fact that he just changed the subject, and he didn't address what she said, and she ended up in tears. And he was basically like, I'm so sorry, but I've had that much news today, I just can't take this in. And their date just ended. So that was that. Chelsea and Trevor ended up having their second date, and those two were just vibes in and just having fun. And despite the fact that she was upset from the previous date, she just put it aside and she just went head first with Trevor. And they both kind of agreed on that day, we both want partners that want to have fun and that just want to have a laugh. We'll be that for each other. And whilst they're talking about that, she just slipped in that she was married. And she was like, oh, did I tell you that before? And he was like, I don't think you did you? And she was like, yeah, I mentioned it in the first date. And he was like, I don't think you did. And she was like, well, I was married before. She was like, okay. She just changed the approach, like, because I don't think she wanted to get her hopes dashed, But he was like, I was 98% close to getting married before, but it didn't happen. So, like, I understand, life ain't a fairy tale. Like, let's keep it real. We then see Amy and Johnny on their second date, and those two, again, just having a ball with each other, loads of jokes and just pure laughing. And we get to the girls, and AD is having her confessional, and she was like, you know what, the vibe between the girls is getting really territorial and everybody is playing their cards really close to their chest. Anyway, AD and Clay ended up on their third date, and he kind of opened up to her a bit, if you could call it opening up. So he was like, I've got a big ego. He confessed, I've got a big ego. And, my playboy persona is a bit of a security blanket. In a nutshell, is what he said. And then went on to say, basically, I need validation. And she was like, I can validate you, that's no problem, And then he then started saying, you're a physical person and I need to know what your physical attributes are, because ultimately in the real world I'm used to, certain things, and I want to know that that's what I'm going to get. I don't think I can commit without knowing beforehand, what I'm going to be getting into. I know it seems shallow, but I just need to know. And she was just like, what the hell? Like, that just doesn't even make sense. And he was like, I know I seem shallow, but I just need to know. And she was like, well, I'm not prepared to tell you what my characteristics are. Like, you're not going to know. I'm not going to tell you. I'm not going to share that with you, So their date ended. I was a bit perplexed with him, because I thought, you know what, you just haven't got no game and no tact, But their date ended. The red flags that she was thinking were there earlier really came to fruition. Anyway, she ended up on her third date with Matt. And once again, her and Matt just vibes in. And Matt was like, I'm jealous of you going on other dates with guys. And he was just being really honest about himself. And it's like, I feel really connected. And like, my greatest accomplishment is finding you. And, he just wants to call his mama. And all of this kind of stuff. And she was just like, oh my God. And she was just like, I am feeling you, And he was dropping the lyrics. And he basically said to her, look, I want to know your dad. I need to have a word with your dad and speak to him and ask him for your hand, because I feel like you're the man for me. I feel like you're the woman for me. And she was like, well, you could ask my dad, but my dad's dead. So that's not going to happen. And he was just like, I just want to get out of here with you. And I just, I want to be with you. So these two getting ultimately close. Things are looking good. And she kind of said to him, I'm guessing that she kind of had an inclination that he was a white guy and she's a black woman, and just wanted to see whether, you know, race would be a factor, you know, with their relationship. So she was like, are you open to, you know, dating outside of your race? And he was like, yeah, listen, you know, that's not an issue to me. I'm open to dating outside my race. Like, I'm open to it. It's all good. And she was like, me too. You know, I'm all good. And so their day ended. So AD goes back to the ladies' quarters and she's just feeling happy and smitten. And she does look really smitten and taken with this guy. Gets back into the ladies' quarters and, you know, is just kind of keeping her cards close to her chest, but just hearing about everybody else's experiences. She then starts having a conversation with Amber, and Amber starts telling her that she's been speaking to Matthew, and she then says verbatim all of the things that Matthew has said to her. So they basically find out that he's playing the both of them and he's saying the same thing to both of them. Even took it as far as to say to Amber, I want to ask your dad for your hand in marriage. I need to speak to your dad before we can take this any further. And the episode ended there. Okay, my darlings, I'm going to close with a quick first impressions. Real quick, Trevor and Chelsea, I think these two are a good match for each other, and I think their connection was just genuine and effortless from the very beginning. Chelsea and Jimmy, I do think they've got a good connection, but I don't think their connection is as strong as Jimmy and Jessica. Jimmy and Jessica, I like these two together. I really like these two together, and I think that they are a match. AD and Matthew. Based on the drama that we've seen at the end, I'm not quite sure about this guy. I don't know what he's on, because this really threw me for a loop. I do believe that, I thought that the connection that him and AD had was genuine. And to be fair, I really do feel like it is genuine. But at the same time, I'm like, what is this guy on? What is this guy on? But also, is that something to do with the editing of Netflix? Because realistically, they didn't show us the complete dates of him and Amber, so we weren't to know, and it's obvious that he could or would be speaking to other women. So is he to blame? At this point, I'm not 100% sure, but we need to know what's going on. AD and Clay, I'm not keen on Clay. I don't take to him. I feel like he's too physical and he's only interested in flirting, and he really showed himself up by asking AD to describe her attributes. And if she goes for him, she's literally going to be repeating her old life cycle. Amy and Johnny, I think these two have a decent and genuine connection. There's something under the hood with Amy. There is really something under the hood, but I do think that these two click. And finally, Amber and Matthew. Again, we didn't see much of them, but we only heard that, you know, she was getting the same kind of treatment as AD. Like I said about Matthew, don't know what he's all about. To be continued where he's concerned. Please stay tuned, click the subscribe button and turn on your notifications, because we've got episode 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6 to review, and I'm also having live discussions about the episodes at the end of episode 3 and at the end of episode 6. We've got a lot to talk about. So it's a bit crazy because Netflix have just dropped this show in a really odd way. Dropping 6 episodes within the first instance, it's just a bit mad. So we can all agree there's a lot to catch up on and there's a lot to digest. So bear with me, I'm coming with the content. I look forward to hearing from you. Drop in the comments down below and let me know what you think. Let me know who your favourite couple are. Let me know what your predictions are as well. Don't put any future episode spoilers in the comments if you have watched ahead just yet. My darlings, until next time, mwah.